What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Too Much Test podcast, episode 28. I am here. My name is Test Your Levels. I am here with Sam Stolts. We have a special guest who's been here before, Eric Brozer, and he is a weightlifting coach. He's been a weightlifter for a while, bodybuilder. But you can find me on all the different social medias at Test Your Levels. And Eric, where can we find your social media?
On Instagram, I'm at Coach Eric Brozer. On Facebook, if you probably just look up Eric Brozer, you'll find my accounts. So those are my basic social media. If you want to get in contact with me directly, email me at bodyfx2@aol.com. And my website is www.brozerbuilt.com.
That's with a Z or an S?
An S. It's pronounced like a Z, but it's actually S. BROSER. Brozer Built.
And then you just mentioned before we were about to get into this that you've got something fun that's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, this is something I've been working on for almost a year at this point. So I've worked with many supplement companies, probably at least 6 or 7 supplement companies in my career. Work with them in many respects, and worked with some really good supplement companies. All of them, excellent products. But I've always wanted to do my own thing. I've always had my own ideas. Being in the industry for so long, about what certain types of products that I'd like to see put together. So I decided to do it myself. And so I'm in partnership with a company called All American Pharmaceutical out of Billings, Montana, which is basically about the finest manufacturing facility in the country. And I am coming out with a product line known as Spellbound Nutrition. Spellbound is because my nickname is Merlin. So it kind of goes along with that whole magical spells kind of stuff. So I thought that was kind of catchy. So Spellbound Nutrition will hopefully be out mid-June is when we're looking to launch. I'm starting off with a pre-workout type of a supplement, a post-workout recovery growth formula, and a very unique fat burner. And so all these products will hopefully be available mid-June. You'll see it on my social media as it starts to develop and come out. The labeling is done. It looks fantastic. The products are done. So hopefully that launch will happen soon. And I think that the people who try these products are going to really like them. I've tested them myself. The flavoring is excellent, and the ingredient profiles are excellent. And like I said, the manufacturing is absolutely top-notch. So there's going to be no fear of any ingredients that shouldn't be in there, no contaminants, no heavy metals, no drugs of any kind, and what's on the label will be in the bottle, absolutely. So should be a great thing.
Which one are you most excited about? Which product for yourself? Personally?
It's funny because most people get, they're like, oh, Eric, I can't wait to see a pre-workout. Everybody wants a new pre-workout. But for me, it's the post-workout. The post-workout formula for initiating recovery and setting the anabolic mechanisms into action is the thing that actually has me the most excited, because I think this is going to be really potent and really help people get more out of. If you're somebody, and again, one thing I'm going to say, supplements are meaningless if your training and your diet aren't on point. There's no such thing as magic supplements, so let's just get that out of the way right there. I'll be very honest about it. But if your training and your diet is on point, and you put in some good workouts, this post-workout formula I think is going to be really great for igniting muscle growth and recovery.
What? Because like a lot of times when I think of like a post-workout, I just think of like protein, right? But it sounds like it's more.
No, it's more, the ingredients are more specialized to actually work with the mechanisms of the body. Something called the mTOR pathway, which is a pathway for the body to the anabolic mechanism kickstart into action, and just. I don't want to say too much about it. I want to wait until it kind of comes out, but it'll help, with protein synthesis, help the muscles recover, and just help. It's meant to be taken before the post-workout meal, so you get it into your system right away to help. Your body's sort of primed for muscle growth, obviously, afterwards. And depending on what you do after a workout depends on how much your training is going to be amplified. So this really helps kick things into action. Then, of course, you have your post-workout meal, and then that completes the process. So I think it's going to be great.
What do you think about, so everybody who's into fitness, even at an elementary level, hears about like a anabolic window or like the post-workout time, and you need to eat a meal after you train, or you're not going to be able to grow, right? And you have opinions on both sides of that, right? And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, because I know you also tend to take an approach where you look at the science and the data behind it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and share any interesting, feedback.
Yeah, that's a good segue into a topic.
Practice.
Listen, I don't think you have to actually, this product that I'm talking about is really meant to be taken right after the workout. So, I would try to like literally, get it in right after the workout as soon as you're done, if you can bring it with you and take it down. But as far as the meal goes, I think that there is an anabolic window, because I think that your body is metabolically primed to take carbohydrates in and help to restore glycogen, as well as it needs amino acids relatively quickly. I don't think it means that you have to like literally down a meal the second you put the weights down, but I think within, you should try to be eating within about a half an hour of your workout, because I think, cortisol levels are going to be a little higher. Insulin, your insulin is going to be, less resistant after you train. So I think that it's an important time to get carbohydrates in, especially fast-acting carbs. I think it's a good time, when you take supplements after a workout, amino acids, from protein, which I tend to, I like to use whey isolate after a workout, because I believe it's better that your body's having something that's, already broken down.
Well, because the whey isolate gets in your system like very quickly in terms of digestion, right? I believe.
Yeah, whey isolate's going to get it, quicker than, a whole protein source like, red meat or, fish or whatever. And I think that is optimal to take post-workout. Again, it's not the kind of thing that if you choose to eat after a workout, you're not going to grow. I just think that to optimize post-workout recovery, that having whey isolate, because it's fast-acting, because it's high in branched-chain amino acids, it's going to get into the muscles quickly. Take a fast-acting carbohydrate, because insulin is a very important hormone post-workout, and because your body's going to be primed to utilize the insulin and push. It's the word really would be to partition the calories towards muscle and away from fat, because insulin also can promote fat gain. But after workout, your body, it's almost like your muscles are asking for the nutrients. So you're going to partition and push those calories, the amino acids and the carbohydrates, towards muscle cells, not really towards fat cells. And I think this is going to be, you're going to be more insulin sensitive closer to finishing the workout. I think that the longer and further you get away from finishing the workout, that the insulin sensitivity is going to start to wane. Also, like I said, cortisol is high after a workout, because you've just put such stress on the body. You don't want that cortisol floating around for too long. So you want to, bring that cortisol down, and taking those amino acids and carbohydrates after the workout will lower the cortisol.
I was reading something, or talking to somebody recently, and they were, and I'm not sure how you would actually measure something like this, but they were talking about, say, insulin sensitivity in a specific body part, like legs or something like that. So after somebody trains, glycogen would, I don't know for sure, but the idea, I haven't looked at any research, but I would think your glycogen stores are reduced, and you're probably going to be, like, as you just mentioned, more sensitive to insulin post training. So is it kind of like if you were to compare different body parts, is it going to be, I mean, like, I'm just conceptualizing things as we're talking about them here, putting this together. So say if I trained legs, like I had legs today. So my legs are going to probably be slightly, maybe just marginally more sensitive to insulin post-workout, having something like a simple carb, and then with a meal would allow that to, hopefully partition more so into the legs. Is that like the thinking behind this?
Well, I think that's a really, really interesting question. And I think that would make a really interesting study. So I'm not going to say that I know 100% whether there's more insulin sensitivity in the actual body part you just trained or not. I would probably think that it's on a whole body level that there's more insulin sensitivity. However, I think that the muscle that was just trained is probably going to take the most advantage of that. being that's the one that's been exhausted. That's the one that's just had fiber trauma, as the cells have been, broken down. That it's, most of the glycogen has probably been taken out of the body part that you just worked. So I think that the whole body systemic insulin sensitivity is probably going to be taken advantage of by the body part you just trained the most, taken advantage of, in just in the fact that you just trained it. But I don't think that, I doubt, and I could be wrong, I doubt that there's more insulin sensitivity within that actual muscle. I just think that,
and like, how would you even like, you have to take a biopsy? Like, how are you going to measure that? Like,
yeah, I mean, maybe there is some type of a scientific method, although I doubt that any scientist is going to take it. I don't think that people are concerned enough with muscle growth as we are to try to figure something like that out. But I think that would be a really cool study. But yeah, I mean, maybe a muscle biopsy or maybe following, I don't know, doing some kind of thing where they can, sort of like
some type of scan or something like that.
Yeah, like a scan, or like putting a dye into the system and see with the food and seeing how it works and how it travels. Would be an interesting study. But
I know, like tester levels is probably just waiting to ask a question. Sorry.
No, I don't know about the insulin portion of it, but I mean, it seems like from an evolutionary standpoint. So, caveman, I'm walking up the mountain for 3-4 hours, right? My legs are torched, and I find some food. Like, it makes sense that my body's going to be like, okay, I'm going to take all this nutrition and this protein, and I'm going to, give as much to it as I can to the legs, because we may have to walk up the mountain for another 4 hours tomorrow, and I need to repair these muscles as quickly as possible so we can go find more food. For a lot of different stuff I look at, I've started to look at it as like, what would our bodies do in order to help us survive? And that's what I think we've been conditioned to do over millions of years.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people need to also look at is that, a lot of people think about just sort of like on this topic is that, you train a body part, and people are very, very concerned about muscular recovery of the body part they just trained, which is, of course, extremely important. But what's just as important is systemic recovery. You're talking about the central nervous system. You're talking about the immune system. You're talking about all the systems of the body that are going to be affected by intense training. So, when you're talking about getting your nutrition after a workout and getting rest after a workout, yes, we want the body part that we just trained to recover. But just as important, or maybe even more important, is systemic recovery within the entire body. Because if the central nervous system is not recovered, if the entire hormonal profile is not restored, if the immune function that could be affected from stress is not optimized, we're not going to grow. Because the body puts muscle growth pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to the energy that it wants to expend for survival. So just as an aside, I just think that people need to think about systemic recovery, and that's part of the whole process after training.
When it comes to recovery, so it's interesting, and it makes me think about like the frequency thing. So it's not. At one point, I was working at doing like 5 meals or 6 meals, smaller meals a day, and I didn't feel like I noticed a ton of a difference. And today I do about 3 meals a day, and then maybe like a snack or two. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen anything like personally. I didn't notice much, but I'm not like competing. Have you seen any data on that? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, is say 6 meals, say 3 meals that are just kind of cut in half and spread out over 6 meals instead of 3 meals, is that in some way more beneficial for the recovery, right? Because we agree, like this whole system needs to recover. Your central nervous system, your body has to repair, your brain has to like basically repair any like breakdown that it's had during the day of any synapses, right? All that takes place. But is there benefit to doing the more frequent eating throughout the day?
Well, I think that I've read a lot of different conflicting information on this stuff. Probably more scientific data and probably more in the trenches data, leads people to believe that more frequent feedings is better. However, I do know a lot of guys who have only 3 or 4 meals a day rather than 5, 6, or 7 meals a day who, are extremely muscular and look great. So I'm not going to say to them, you're doing it wrong. I know from personal experience, I do better with smaller, more frequent meals. Most of my clients do as well. I think what you have to look at is, obviously there's a level of a caloric level and a macronutrient level that we, really kind of need to reach every single day in order to either, focus on muscle growth or focus on fat loss, or, maybe a combination of the two. And then I think the question becomes food absorption. If you need 300 grams of protein a day, let's just say you do really well on that, you're going to get as much out of eating 3 meals of 100 grams of protein each versus 6 meals of 50? Is your body going to process those 6 meals of 50 grams better than it will 3 meals of 100? Same thing with carbohydrates, same thing with fats. I would tend to believe that the body, and there's also a lot of the problem with a lot of the studies on protein absorption, because, there's a lot of studies that say, oh, you can't absorb more than 20 grams at a meal, which I think is total horseshit, because most of the populations that they're working on are not, training their asses off every day. They're just very, sometimes elderly people or whatever, so it doesn't work. I personally would have to say that I believe, and through experience with clients and myself, I think that most people would tend to do better and probably absorb their food better and probably have a better energy levels during the day, more stable blood sugar, so on and so forth, from having more frequent meals. Now, I don't think there's any set amount of meals that work for people. I think, I have some clients who work longer days and they're up for more hours, and I give them more meals because they have better energy when I give them 7 meals a day. Some people can't even think of eating 7 meals a day, and they like 5.
So when you do 7 meals, but that's like, what is 7 times 5, right? Or something like 500 calories a meal type thing? Or, you know what I mean? That's 3,500 calories a day.
Well, I mean, it could be. It depends on the person. It depends on the person. Like for myself.
Yeah, it depends on where they're at. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person. Man and woman. Do they weigh 250? Do they weigh 150? There's a lot of factors. But for myself, like I usually, when I was younger and I was building, my main focus was like I needed to gain weight and build. I needed a lot more calories than I need now. I needed to eat like 6 or 7 times a day, and I needed to eat like 55 grams of protein per meal. I needed to eat like 70 or 80 grams of carbs a meal. Like otherwise, I just didn't get any bigger. Now I'm down to eating 5 meals a day, and I probably only take in about maybe 50 grams of protein per meal. So that's like 250 for the day. So that's only about 1 gram per pound of body weight for me, when I used to be way over that. I don't take in a lot of carbs, to be honest, maybe 150 grams a day on a training day. I take in a lot of healthy fats because I believe those are extremely important. But I don't, I probably take in way less calories now, and I'm bigger than I've ever been, just, muscularly. So I think that it's just, something that, changes over time a little bit. But still, I mean, to go back to your question, I think that I would never tell anybody if they're eating 3 meals a day and they're doing great that they're doing something wrong. But I would challenge them and say, if you're curious, try 5 meals a day, spreading out those same calories over 5 or 6, and see if you do better. Maybe you didn't, Sam, but
well, that was like 10 years ago or longer. So it's been, the consistency of where I'm at right now has yielded, because the consistency of everything like really makes a difference. Because you're like, oh, I've been consistent, and they're following a 12-week thing or a 16-week, but like the consistency over, say, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of like, you are always consistent in, say, working out, training, but then like shit hits the fan here, and maybe you drop the ball for a week or something, right? But the consistency with all the pieces over a longer period of time yields so much results. And I've literally been thinking about this. So it's interesting that you bring this up, because it's really good points.
I really tend to think that, we have to look at like the sometimes you have to kind of look at the evidence that's out there. And I think that if you look at most of the most massive guys in the world, and let's put the drug thing aside, because there's also a lot of, I got really big naturally too. Putting all that stuff aside, the majority of them eat 5, 6, 7, 8 meals a day. they wouldn't be able to think of eating 3 meals a day because the meals would be too large. They'd be too large. You couldn't eat it. And I do think that there is an absorption issue. I think that your body will get overwhelmed, and maybe your system of enzymes is not going to be able to properly assimilate that much food in a sitting. I think it'll better do so over smaller meals and not get overwhelmed. And then I think you'll have better absorption of the nutrients. And then I think over time that would probably equal more growth. And I do think when it comes to fat loss, it certainly is an advantage to eat more frequently, because every time you eat, it bumps up your metabolic rate. So I think that that's also very important too. So my theory would be to go more frequent.
I will start testing that probably tomorrow. I'll start testing that, even if it's just switching up to 4 meals to start with. And then, every week I'll work on testing that out myself. You mentioned fat loss. I'm currently running a 90-day challenge, so I'm not, can't win the challenge, but I can use it for myself to drop some body fat. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to somebody who knows a lot more about the training aspects for fat loss, when somebody goes into fat loss and they want to, the biggest piece is obviously going to be your diet for fat loss, of course, but how do you change things, if at all, for training when you're going into dropping body fat? So I was like 246, and I'm probably going to go down to 220-ish, or depending on how I look around like that. But I'm curious how you change training styles, or is it the same throughout that?
Well, I think you've hit upon one of the biggest long-standing myths in weight training. And I'm not saying necessarily you're doing this, but a lot of people do it. They say, when you're trying to get big, you lift heavy weights for low reps, and when you're trying to cut up, you lift lighter weights for high reps. That's a huge myth, and it's got no basis in any science, and it doesn't have any, in the trenches value either. I think it's just people they heard it, so they believe it. So my answer is, whatever kind of training is optimizing your growth is the same type of training you should be using to maintain your growth when you're losing body fat. So no, you don't change your training at all, in my opinion. If you're, let's say you're getting ready for a competition, and I'm evaluating your physique, and you have certain areas that are, strengths or weaknesses. Yeah, maybe 16 weeks before the show or something, maybe I would play with your training split or something.
But that has nothing to do with fat loss. That's because hey, you're weak in this specific area. Let's try to add some more volume or whatever.
Yeah, but fat loss, for the fat loss, going to your question, no, I wouldn't be changing anything at all, because you're not really going to, if you're somebody who is looking to optimize, there's a difference between somebody who I just want to lose body fat, versus somebody like you who is also interested in maintaining your muscle size while you lose fat. You don't want to just lose, So if you're somebody like, I wouldn't be changing my training at all, and I'd be relying on the diet and or cardio to drop the fat, and I'd be using my weight training to maintain, or even still try to build as much muscle as possible throughout the process. So I wouldn't change my training at all. Now, if you're somebody who, I have some clients who they are not necessarily bodybuilders. They just want to lose a lot of body fat. Yeah, they want to keep their muscle, and they can't do, let's just say maybe they don't have a lot of time to do a lot of extra cardio. They're very hardworking people. They work many hours. So I have to figure out a way to get them to burn more calories through their training because they don't have a lot of time to add extra cardio. I may start doing a lot of supersetting with them, or circuit training, or giant setting, or things, or having them move a little quicker through the workout to try to optimize their time towards their goal. You know what I'm saying?
So 100%. Yeah.
Exactly. So that I might change the training for them in that specific instance, but I'm kind of directing the question more towards you and towards people probably watching or listening to this podcast who want to maintain or build muscle while they're burning that body fat. And for them, no, you don't change your training at all. You still try to lift as heavy as you were before. You still try to push the same weights. use the same intensity. The only time that maybe training will change at all is if you have gotten to a very low body fat level, you have less water in your body, less body fat, less cushioning in the joints, and then maybe you shouldn't be trying to push the really low rep sets just for joint integrity and making sure you don't pull anything or strain anything. But still, the concept of training should be the same.
I want to ask you about test your levels. If you are like, hey, I want to ask a question, feel free to interrupt me at any point.
I do have a question, and I wanted to ask you, since you worked out naturally and you said, I believe you started TRT not too long ago, what the differences were. But I did have a question about dieting, because me and Sam were talking, and I've been looking to drop a little weight, and I was saying that I may just like take a week off from weightlifting and just solely do cardio and the sauna for a week. But mentally, that fucks with my head is that I'm going to lose muscle during that week. Oh,
we can still hear you.
Yeah. I was saying mentally, it messes with me thinking that I'm going to lose gains. I know that's not really realistic, but what would your thoughts be on someone, working out 3 weeks and then doing cardio for a pure week?
We chatted about this. So I'm curious, because I'll let you know what I said afterwards. But
I don't want to say like, oh, that's a terrible idea. Like that's the worst idea I ever heard. It's not a horrible idea. There's nothing terrible about it. Like to just think, because it's only a week. But I don't really think that you would need to do that. I think that weight training is cardio. The thing about cardio is that cardio burns calories while you're doing it. Doesn't really have an afterburn, which basically means how many calories you burn for the hours after cardio. Weight training is different. Weight training burns calories while you're training, but it also affects hours, many, many hours, even up to 24 hours after you train. It'll actually stimulate the metabolism. So I think that when you're trying to burn body fat, it's actually advantageous to lift weights. So I think that you might be doing yourself a disservice by not lifting weights during that week rather than and just doing cardio. If you felt like you wanted to do that, as a recovery week, like there's nothing wrong with that after, like 3 months of training and taking a recovery week and just doing cardio, that's fine. But I think if you're trying to burn body fat, I don't see any reason why you should do that. I think that actually it could possibly hold you back.
Interesting.
Right. I was trying to get you to not take the week off too, or like potentially not, see it that way potentially. But I appreciate the insights from Eric here. You had mentioned, there's actually 2 other questions that I wrote down, but you had mentioned take a week off after 3 months of training kind of thing. Is that something that your clients regularly do or you regularly do? Because it's definitely not something that I do.
No, it's not something that I regularly do. No, because I can't handle it. So
yeah. Take a week off from training. Like, what am I going to do with myself?
No, I try to get people after competitions. I'll, unless they have another competition coming right up, I do encourage them actually to take time off. I do say just, either take an entire week off and do nothing, or maybe just do some light cardio. And if they say to me, Eric, I cannot stay out of the gym, then I'll encourage them to do something like, instead of training 5 days a week, do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 full body workouts, just get a pump and do not, no kind of nothing that would breaking muscle tissue down. But yeah, I actually think, honestly, looking as a coach and knowing what I know, looking from the outside and into this, I actually think it would probably be very beneficial for most of us, including myself, to, after putting in, 3-4 months straight of training, to take, especially when you're past like age 40, or, even 35, you've been training for a long time, maybe in your 20s, you're still Superman and, you don't need it. But I think as you get older, I think it's a good idea to take a week off. Let your joints recover a little bit. Let the central nervous system reboot. Let your hormonal profile, normalize. Let the cortisol come down. Maybe your testosterone will bump back up without, just naturally. I think it's a good idea. I just know it's very, very hard to do because most of us psychologically can't stay out of the gym. So I can't blame anybody for saying, well, Eric, I can't do that. I'm going to be like, well, I don't blame you. It's hard, but it probably would be very beneficial and the reason I say that is because I have clients who maybe have had an injury or an illness or a family issue or something where they've been forced out of the gym for a week or two, and then they come back and I start tracking them again, and then all of a sudden they make a leap in progress, whether it be strength or the way they look. And I know it's probably because they had that time, they were forced to take it, but they had that time off. And they'd be like, wow, my shoulder, which has been hurting me for the last 3 months, all of a sudden it feels good. Because it got rest,
Sorry, I've had where I've had to take off time, whether I think it's because of traveling or something, for a couple of days, and maybe you miss like 2 days here and then 2 days in the front week or something, and then you come back to hitting those body parts again, and it does seem like you've like a super compensated, so to speak, in a way, past where you were, and it feels different. And then you also get crazy DOMs because you haven't trained something in a while, where maybe previously I wasn't getting as sore as I would like to have been sore. And now with taking that time off, I like that idea a lot. I started incorporating fasting for 24 hours per month for the past year, just for health reasons. And it's awesome. Like, you don't, because it's not like a normal thing for us to do, right? The first thing I noticed is like, holy shit, I have so much time because prepping meals and like just spending the time, like even just heating it up and then washing the dishes or whatever, like all that, and then eating, all that just goes away. You have so much time like throughout the day to do that. And I was like, that might be an interesting thing to do, to like force myself to do it maybe once every 6 months. Take, I don't know, a week, or maybe, I don't know if I can do a week, or I would have to really force myself to try to do a week.
It's interesting because there are studies, and there are also, I did it myself one time, but I might want to start doing it more frequently. That there are studies that show that, we kind of get protein exhausted. People who lift weights, tend to have protein heavy diets. And there seems to be some type of almost like exhaustion, whether it's the enzymes or something, whatever process helps process the protein and break them down, that shows that if you take a break from eating protein, and then, maybe not necessarily fast, but, you take a break from eating whole proteins and maybe just have carbohydrates or, maybe fruits for just a few days and live off of that there seems to be some sort of a reboot that goes on when you start eating protein again, that your body starts to assimilate and absorb it better. Mm-hmm. And I just think that the body works this way. This is why even people who take like creatine, for example, as a supplement, which I think is one of the best supplements on the planet. There's no studies that say that it's dangerous to keep taking creatine every single day and not break from it. However, I have always seen, and I've experimented this with myself, and I've experimented with other people, that cycling creatine seems to make it work better over time. So like a 12-week on, 4-week off, or 16-week on, 4-week off, it seems to be that, you make a certain amount of gains from creatine, whether it be strength gains or whatever. It's all subtle because we're not talking about steroids here. But you make some gains from it, you feel strong, you feel better. You take 4 weeks off, you don't really lose much, but then when you go back on it again, you get another boost. But if you keep taking it continuously, months, years straight, you really don't feel it anymore. So I've always told people to cycle it. And the reason why I bring this up is because I kind of feel that the body just has its own mechanism where it gets, for lack of a better term, tired of the same thing over and over again, whether it be a food, a supplement, a training regimen, anything.
Drugs.
Anything. Your body will look at alcohol. If you drink alcohol, one drink gets you drunk the first time, and then you need 2, then you need 3. And then eventually you don't get drunk anymore, no matter how much alcohol you drink. But then if you took a break for 6 weeks and then drank it, you'd get drunk again. There seems to be some mechanism within the body that helps us adapt, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing, adapt. So that we need like these little breaks in order to reset the body. It's like just rebooting a computer or something.
Going off of that, like that, I was in my mind, like people who smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or weed, right? You build a tolerance to this over time. You do this with drugs, but one of the, because when we're thinking about things, I'm always like, hey, is this like something that plays out in the real world? Is this something that like actually happens, or is it just some like fantasy fucking shit that I'm making up? And when I look at my training, right, I do it with compounds, right? I try to switch it up very regularly, just because of what we're talking about here. And then it's like, well, I do exactly the same thing for my training style, like how I'm actually lifting in the gym. And I'm perpetually like changing that up. Or if sometimes I might be going like 8 reps on stuff and like that's the max of what I'm hitting, and other times I'm doing 25 or 100 fucking reps on certain things because I'm just rotating through them, or sometimes it's negatives only, or whatever the case is. And it's constantly, and it works in training, and we know it works in training. So why wouldn't it work in all the other facets of our life as we go through and do this stuff? You know what I mean?
Well, Arnold, I remember Arnold would always say like he would try to confuse his muscles. You know, he said he's like, my muscles never know what's coming. You know, I may be doing, you know, sets of 5, you know, 5 sets of 5. I may do 6 sets of 20, you know, and it just switches up. Yeah, I mean, I think like remember when I told you guys, it was closer when we started this podcast, that I would get if I would drink too much coffee, I would start feeling hypoglycemic and like crash. Well, I've been drinking coffee, and I don't drink it in big amounts. I drink little bits throughout the day, like microdosing, kind of, but I haven't gotten that feeling in a long time. And I think it's because I built a tolerance to caffeine. I'm still sensitive to it, but I've built a tolerance to where I don't crash like that.
There's lots of research out there on the alcohol front, or like cigarette type front on that. But I wanted to ask you, this is a personal question, not for you, but like that I was curious about. Henny, I think it's Henny Rambot. Like he's worked with like Phil Heath, and he's also worked with, I think there's like an influencer dude that he's working with, and I think he also worked with Jeremy Buendia. And it seems that when they have switched their training style, or probably drug profiles, and while they're doing that stuff, but I'm going to talk from the training standpoint. He's got that thing. Is it Henny or something? Where is it FSD something 7?
FSD7 is Honey. That's Honey.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And what, like, is there, because you see them working with him, and then you see their physiques all obviously transitioning to a similar type of very full muscle bellies, and the same. There's a similar look that you can not always tell, but sometimes you can tell you've probably been able to see this, like by seeing somebody's physique, if it's kind of similar to somebody else's in certain ways, that this might be the person that they're actually working with as a trainer. And so I wanted to ask your thoughts on like the FSD7.
This is a troublesome one for me. I don't want to say. I mean, I respect Honey a lot. He's one of the best coaches in the industry, and obviously he coached Phil Heath for a long time, one of the best bodybuilders ever. But I will say about Phil is that he was so genetically gifted. I think many of us could have coached him to that many Mr. Olympias, to be honest.
Real quick, what is FSD7? Just for people listening,
basically,
I have no idea.
Here's the thing. FSD7 basically is that you finish off the workout with a movement where you do 7 sets, of 15, 20 reps of a final movement, just to get like this major pump, and you take really short rests between sets. So to me, it's really nothing revolutionary. It's just basically like getting a huge pump at the end of the workout. Now, maybe, the people that he's worked with, and then there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but, he's working with very genetically gifted people who are using gear and whatever. And, and maybe it's helping them over and above what they were doing before. And also, remember, he also helps people with diet as well. And he's very talented in that area. So, I mean, and maybe he helps with protocols too. I don't know. I don't know everything. I don't know everything that he does, but I mean, so I think it's what he does with people that's been successful is probably on all fronts, hitting it from all different areas. I don't think there's anything magical about FST7. I don't really think there's anything new to it. So I mean, that's why I was always kind of like, you know, with the training systems that I've come out with, I personally think there's a lot more science behind it and a lot more, you know, use of physiology and how the body works and why the muscles grow and how we, you know, the different muscle pathways, you know, from, you know, fiber trauma to mechanical tension to metabolic stress and hitting on all those areas. So I don't think that there's anything special about FSD7, but I think that he had some, you know, big people using it and it got a name. And like I said, he's a talented coach. He's really good with diet and everything like that, and great with motivation. So I think he had some success. I don't know if it really developed the physiques in any kind of similar way, because really, I mean, he probably had, you know, he named Phil Heath and Jeremy, and you know, he actually even trained Jay Cutler for a little while. But he also probably has, you know, 50 other clients that he trained who probably look nothing like these guys. You know,
no, 100% correct.
Yeah, they're totally different.
It sounds like he trademarked like supersets. You know, it's like if I was a coach and I'm like, all right, well, Chris Bumstead's doing 21s at the end of his workout, and so is freaking Larry Wheels, and you know, and that like everyone that, you know, it's trademarked. It's 21s. You know,
yeah,
it sounds what it's kind of is to me.
Yeah, it wasn't really anything revolutionary. I just did think that he put and my first training program that I ever came out with was called Power Rep Brain Shock, which was in the year 2000, and the letters behind it were PRRS. And I kind of feel like I was the first one that came out with like these little, you know, 4-letter or 5-letter names, you know, these cute little names. But it was easier than saying Power Rep Brain Shock, which is why I did it. And it wasn't trying to like market anything. It just happened to take off. And then there was a DVD and all kinds of articles on it and everything. And it did, you know, it became its own brand. But then after that, all kinds of different ones started coming out with these little names.
I just created TYL 14, where basically you do 14 sets of 20 at the end of your workout, and you get an even better pump.
Yeah,
trademark.
You guys heard it here first. You can get that by just DMing him on Instagram for the protocol, and it'll sell to you for $14.99.
Yeah,
for coaching, hit me up on Instagram.
So yeah, no, but I'm not saying this is not me, you know, knocking Hani, because Hani's he's a coach. I respect him. He's been in the industry for a long time. He's trained a lot of champions. I just don't personally think there's anything special with FSD7, to be honest. I mean,
for a muscle. So I appreciate the insights on that. Because the curiosity behind that, to give it context. A lot of my training over the last, say, 36 months has evolved to include a primary muscle group and a little bit of a secondary muscle group that is not like chest, triceps type of thing. Maybe it's chest, but then the area that I'm focusing on and I think I messaged you similar to this, and I'll go through and do something where I'm like, several sets of, say, quads, and it's just quads on a chest day to increase the pump, right? I get that pump, and I might do something, maybe it's 3 or 4 sets, but I might do 25 reps on these. And I've seen results on it. So that's why because I know it's just like extra volume on there, but I didn't know if there was, you know, behind that. But when I heard you mention a couple of minutes ago, to change the topic on that piece a little bit, you mentioned the lower reps. Can you tell me your thoughts on lower reps to actually build muscle? Because it's not something I very rarely ever do. And also, what is your definition to define lower reps?
Yeah, well, within bodybuilding, I would say lower reps is probably more like, you know, 6, 7, 8. You know, I mean, for bodybuilding, you know, for powerlifter, that's a ton of reps. You know, they're thinking more like 1, 2, or triples. You know. But lower, you know, lower rep training, if you want to say, I think is more effective when you start out training than it is later on. I think that you know, because you know, if you can gain strength within those. I mean, I can't. Even when I was younger, I never understood people, you know, going to the gym and, you know, and trying to build muscle, and they're constantly just doing singles or doubles and thinking they're building muscle, because they're not. You know, you need to have the muscle has to be under tension for a certain period of time. Otherwise you're basically working the central nervous system. You're not working the actual muscle tissue, breaking down fiber. But I think that, the thing about bodybuilding is that, and building muscle, is that, again, what I said before is there's a lot of different pathways to muscle growth. It's not just a singular, you do this and this is the result. Muscles grow for a lot of different reasons. And you have to, if you want to optimize your growth, if you want to reach your genetic potential, you have to hit all of those pathways, and you have to hit them regularly. I think that a reason why a lot of people stagnate very, very quickly, or get frustrated or think that genetics suck, is because they're not doing this. They tend to, people go into the gym, they tend to find a pool of exercises that they're comfortable with. They tend to find a rep range that they're comfortable with, and then a certain level of intensity and a certain rest between sets. And they just do this day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And going back to the tolerance issue, your body is going to learn this after a while, and it's not going to respond.
Have you thought about putting together a framework for that with a 3-letter acronym that you can sell? Because I think that is a goal. I mean, maybe not for beginners as much, in my personal opinion, but that is that could be something that's very, very important. Like whether it's putting together something where it's, in a quarter or however people want to break it down, you have those different pieces in it, and you can call it something fucking cool that's 3 letters and sell that.
Well, my Power Rep Range shock training program, which really was the one that started it all for me in terms of notoriety, it has a DVD, which obviously people don't really watch DVDs anymore, but it was the best-selling DVD at Iron Man magazine for 4 straight years. And they also did an ebook on it, which is still available. You can still get through me, which explains the whole system and how to do it. And I also have another training program, which was my second one, called FDFS, which is short for fiber damage, fiber saturation, which is basically like talking about damaging or breaking down the muscle fibers and then saturating them with a lot of blood, oxygen, and hormones with higher up type sets. And that also has an ebook. But then I've developed several systems after that. And I have thought about, I think what you're talking about is sort of like laying down a protocol for using all these systems over a long period of time, so you have a way to cycle it. And this is what I do with my clients. When my clients, as long as they're, a little bit more advanced level, not necessarily advanced, but even intermediate, this is what I do for them manually. I basically go back and I look, this week I use this protocol, this week I want to use this protocol, this one I want to repeat, this one, so I do it manually. But I have thought about doing, either an ebook or a system or something on what you're talking about right here to help people to manage it over a period of time. Because what I was going to say before was basically that, low reps do work, high reps do work, supersets do work. But you got to put them all together, and I think right. You have to put it together correctly. But what I'm trying to say is that training is multidimensional. It's not one-dimensional, which is why I'm saying that a lot of people, most people, go into the gym. I used to see it all the time. I would go back when I lived in New York, and I trained in the same gym for many years. I've moved around a lot, so it's been hard for me to stay in one spot. But I used to, I was growing and I was doing better. And then I turned pro in natural bodybuilding and I was growing, I was getting bigger and this and that. And I would look at other people and they would look exactly the same every single year. And every Monday they would go to the gym. I'd go to the gym and they'd be bench pressing and then incline pressing. And and I used to look at them and be like, why are they satisfied doing the same, aren't they getting it through their head that they're still doing the same thing over and again? They look exactly the same. Is that satisfying? Or maybe they like that. I don't know. But most people I know who go to the gym go there to progress. So I never really understood that from early time. Obviously as I got older and I got more into it, and this became my living. And, and I set out to learn why the body grows, how the body grows. And I started developing these different systems. Then it became really, really clear to me that, the body is an adaptive machine and we need to stay ahead of the curve. We need to beat it to the punch, because if we don't, you're going to just very quickly adapt to anything that you're doing if you do it. And the longer you've been training, the more quickly it adapts. That's the way it works. There'll be in the beginning, you could do the same training program and just try to get a little stronger or do it a few more reps. For 6 straight months, you're fine. Then, maybe your body's going to start adapting to a program every 3 months, and then it'll start adapting every 2, and then every month. And then eventually you get to a point where you got to start doing something different every single week. But all these different approaches work and especially if they're put together intelligently, like this is what you're talking about here. If they're cycled correctly and used correctly, you can really make progress, I think, almost indefinitely, especially if obviously if you get to a point where, then we start talking about things like TRT, because obviously once your hormonal levels start to come down and things like that, then it becomes very difficult to fight that. I mean, if you used to have 1,000 milligrams of nanoliters per deciliter, and now you only have 200, you're not going to make the same gains. But if, making things all equal, you can make gains into your 50s, 60s. I mean, you can keep going if you do it right, but you have to do it right, and you have to work with your body, not against it. You can't train 7 days a week when you're 50 years old and expect to make the gains you did when you were 20. You have to adapt mentally and then make it physical and say, okay, this is what I got to do now versus what I did 5 years ago. When I want to learn, I used to be able to get ready for a contest in 6 to 8 weeks. Boom, I can get shredded. I could not do that anymore. I have to take time, and it's the same thing with muscle growth. But yet, I'm bigger now at age 53 than I was when I was 33. So
wow, that's a lot, though. That's a lot.
And that's
I'm interested in probably one of the most extreme ways that you can switch it up, like workout wise. Rich Piana's 8-hour arms. You ever seen that video where he trains for 4 hours doing triceps, biceps, goes and eats like a pizza, a couple protein shakes, and then trains for another 4 hours? It's pretty insane. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know that's a shock to your central nervous system. That's causing severe damage, inflammation in the arms. And I think he branded it as you could gain an inch in your arms in one day. Yeah,
there's been many variations of that program. There's been that version. There's also been versions where you basically will do every hour on the hour, you do an arm workout. Like a quick arm workout, 4 or 5 sets for the biceps every hour. And then, an hour goes by, you do it again, and you do it again, you do it again. There's been, 2-a-day training programs where you literally, you go in the morning, you train chest, you do your, 15 sets for chest. You get a couple of meals and you go back later in the day and you do another 15 sets for chest with different exercises. So there's been a lot of variations on this type of a program. I personally think that that's a load of crap that you can gain. Yeah, you gain an inch of fluid and inflammation, not real muscle. Yeah, it's not real. It's, obviously it's the same thing as if you smashed your knee into the wall. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of growth in your knee from the fluid and the inflammation. So while that may be fun, it might be something, hey, listen, you could do, you could do something crazy for a day, just to shock your body and, whatever, maybe it will be, kind of cool, but that's not real growth. And certainly if you try to do that too often, you're going to end up, if you don't end up injuring yourself, you're going to end up burning yourself out. Your central nervous system or something's going to burn out.
You had mentioned a minute ago about training for 7 days, right? And then obviously it can hinder in certain ways. I trained for 11 or 14 days straight, once or twice just to test it out because I wanted to see what it was like. And it was definitely draining. And you could just see the level of intensity for anybody that's listening. I'm just holding my hand up on the left-hand side. Then just kind of went down throughout that 14-day period of time. But now I think about overtraining as more of a tool to utilize. Whereas if you mentioned if you train, do an 8-hour thing or 6 or however the fuck you want to do that thing, like what you were mentioning with Rich Piana's, it's going to fuck your shit up pretty quickly. But I think of overtraining as something that can be utilized as a tool where appropriate, right? If you just drink alcohol every day, then you need to drink 2 drinks to get just as drunk, or 5, or whatever the case is, right? So overtraining I try to implement into my routine on a regular basis, but not too frequent, because I think that like that overtraining, for me, it seems to be something you have that backed up with your clients, or you back that up with science, or you're like, that's, not something that I've utilized very frequently.
I think that what you're saying actually is not completely off the rails. There seems to be some sort of a slingshot effect sometimes. And the best place that I can discuss this and make it make sense is that if when you're getting ready for a competition, obviously you're below maintenance calories, you're doing a ton of cardio, you're probably practicing posing, you're training, and you're in some sort of probably a very overtrained state, systemically and muscularly. So your ultimate goal is, let me just try to, hopefully get into the contest condition, do everything that I have to do to get in contest condition, and hold as much muscle mass as I possibly can, and not burn it out and lose it. However, if you do things correctly after you're finished with your competition, you can actually make a huge amount of gains in your first 2, 3, 4 weeks after a show. And I think part of the reason that, first of all, you have to do things correctly. That means that you're not going to go and eat cheat meals for 7 straight days and sit on your ass. Now, if you want to really strategically do something with training and diet and, everything right after a show, you can increase calories, keep training in, but not train too hard. Just kind of like get a pump, but you go to the gym regularly, so you're not, again, overtaxing yourself. Try to get more sleep, continue your, supplementation regimen, and you can actually slingshot and you gain like 8-10 pounds of muscle. And I think part of the reason for this is, now again, this is not something that I can prove scientifically. I'm going to say only through experience and seeing it over and over and over again, which proves a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that it's almost like your body is taking all that incredibly hard training that you did get ready for the show. And then once you give your body sort of that recovery and a little bit more calories, it's almost like I'm able to manifest something special out of all that extra hard training that you did right before the show, and slingshot past where you normally would have been. I feel like there's something to that, being completely overtrained and then properly getting the rest that you need and the calories and somehow manifesting extra gains. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm describing it correctly, but I see it happen all the time, because I do have people who will say to me, listen, there's some people who after a show, they don't want to do anything. They're exhausted. They're done. There's some people who want to get right back into the gym. And those people who want to get right back into the gym, I say, hey, let's try to really make something out of this. And it happens all the time if you do it correctly, but it's got to be done correctly. Because if you go back to the gym and you train too hard, or you're like, oh my God, I gained 10 pounds of weight over the weekend, and now I want to do a ton of cardio and take it back off so I could look like I'm in contest shape again. You don't want to do that stuff. If you want to use it for muscle growth, you can really slingshot forward done correctly. And I think some of it has to do with that overtraining and your body's ability to, like, I don't know, do something, it's almost like holding it back until you give it the opportunity.
Look, I think of it when I try to describe how I feel about it, almost like there's a yo-yo where you kind of like sit in the center most of the times, but you can go to the extremes as like being up in your hand for the yo-yo, or the yo-yo being at the bottom of like the string there. And we're sitting in the center most of the time with a lot of, and this can be applied to like work, relationships, and all those kinds of things. Because when you think of like a relationship, I think it's very unique in how it can be applied to like a relationship, because a lot of people, from my personal experience, there becomes a complacency in relationships the same way there becomes a complacency in the way you train if you don't think about actively pursuing progressive overload in the many different facets that progressive overload can take. And so as that yo-yo is up in the top hand, that means one thing, and goes into the bottom means the other. So thinking about applying that is almost like how I see this, where I don't understand exactly how it works. I don't know exactly why it works, but it seems to be beneficial for me, like through it. And hearing your response on that, like, is interesting, because I'm like, oh wow, it's not just, I'm just not that crazy whack job. There's other people out there who are seeing similar things, or seeing them with their clients where they get that benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, most of the major discoveries in bodybuilding have happened from the bodybuilders and not from the scientists. Because we've been out there, and there's been a lot of, especially many years ago, when it was really completely brand new, and people probably thought it would be smart to train 6 hours a day, because the more is the better, and then you had people who were they would just squat all day and just try to build legs, or whatever crazy notions, and oh, that didn't work, or that worked, or I'm growing from this and growing for that. Usually it's the scientists who come along long after we've already discovered something, and they go, well, seems to be true. And we're like, well, yeah, we already knew that. We've been doing it for the last 15 years. So that seems to be the way it works. And that's, it's because, I don't think bodybuilding is really, like, obviously a huge, scientific community, issue that they're really looking at, going, well, we really got to figure out how to build bigger people.
The stuff that we think about for, like, is not the stuff that we're ever going to find in, like, the medical literature. It's just, they're testing, like, old folks, or they're testing, like, people who have never trained before, or, like,
yeah, and most,
there's too many variables to, like.
And listen, most what do they? I think that even, like, the labels in different steroids years ago used to say these steroids are not effective for building muscle growth, or something like that. Or and some doctors out there still think don't use creatine because it's a steroid. I mean, it's they don't really know. So yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these things, and again, there are some universal truths to training, and I feel like I've discovered a majority of them, but I will never say that I know everything about every single person on the planet, because we are individuals. So there are certain things that I would say I would never recommend that may work for a few people out there, because they have some unique, physiological difference, whether it be hormonal, whether it be muscle fiber makeup, whether it be recovery ability that's on the highest end. There might be some people out there. I try to, I pretty much look at everybody like, I try to find everybody in the middle. Like, obviously there's a little bit of variance in genetics and this and that, but the majority of people out there, the 98% people out there, are going to be somewhere in this area. But there's going to be people, up and down. Just like there's some people who, if they train more than 3 days a week, they don't grow. I have to discover those things too. There are some people that I've realized, I'll give them, say, for most people, standard is to train 4 days a week, say maybe Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, that type of a thing for most people. And then, some people 5 days, whatever. But I found that to some people who they train 2 or 3 days a week, and they grow a lot better than they do on 4. So, I mean, there's completely different, but you have to be able to find those things, and we're all unique. So, Sam, something that you're doing that may be, testing your, doing some overtraining and then kind of slingshotting off of that, may work really well for you. Maybe it wouldn't work for 99 out of 100 other people, but it just works for you.
Have you ever tested, and I know that we're probably going to run out of time soon, but have you ever tested out what you just said? Because we hear stories about some people, like, I mean, I do, and you probably hear it more often because you talk to more people about the training stuff than I do, where training less is yielding better results. And it's, for people like me, and probably some of the people who are listening, it's almost like an addiction to it, because we enjoy it, right? Whether addictions can be thought of as good or bad, right? I think that is a positive addiction that's going to help me, just what the fuck else am I going to do with that moment of time, right? But have you ever tried dropping that down from, say, 5 days to 2 or 3 days and see what your results are? Like, for me, that would be very, very challenging to drop from 5 days a week to 3 days a week, personally.
Well, here's the cool thing. I've tried almost everything on myself, because I have to try things on myself before I have enough knowledge on the subject, or at least enough experience with it to try it on other people. So, and I consider myself below average genetics, actually. I'm quite the ectomorph. I mean, when I started training, I was 5'11 and a half, 125 pounds. with like almost no muscle on my body. So I think that I was kind of a genetic inferior. Obviously, I have muscle fibers within me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to grow to 265 pounds or whatever at some point. But I don't think I was. I think my progress is more from consistency, discipline, dedication to what I do, and also to knowledge and knowing how to do it. But I have tried almost every single diet program that I possibly can, from, 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight to half a gram, to keto dieting, to the anabolic diet, to high carbs. I've tried everything because I have to see. And I've tried the training, I don't know if you ever heard of Bulgarian burst training, Mensa's training systems, every kind of training, training 7 days a week, training twice a day, training once a day, training the same body part twice. I mean, everything. I've tried it all. And that's what has allowed me to kind of narrow things down, because I would always keep very, very detailed notes on everything about how I'd feel, whether the scale was going up and down, whether my strength was going up and down, whether I was getting sick more often, maybe getting colds more often, is my body, my immune system getting affected, whatever. And that's what allowed me I did this really, really over my first, 15, 20 years of doing this, so that I can become an expert, not only via what I read and what other people said, or even what the guy from the lab coat said, but through my experience. And I think that's what gave me my most, my greatest amount of knowledge, and was able to allow me to work with so many different types of clients, because I do work with Olympian level down to pure beginners. And my job is to be able to make everybody better than they possibly could be, no matter what the level is. So yeah, I have tried it. And I think that, speaking to that point, I have found for myself 4 days a week of training works best for me when it comes to growth. I find that when I get to the third day in a row of training, that third day, for some reason, I don't feel as good as the first 2 days. So
that means sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, so I prefer 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 2 days off. That is what I prefer. And I actually had just recently, when I moved from California to Las Vegas, I reunited with my old training partner, and we used to train 5 days a week. We would do Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we tried to return to that. And both of us looked at each other like, no, I don't know. I don't feel good on that Saturday when we train. I don't feel strong. I feel like something. And so I said, let's cut that day off, and let's go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And both of us started making progress again. So, that's me. And that's me. That's my body. That's my lifestyle. That's my stress level, whatever. If I was, again, paid to be a professional bodybuilder and the only job I had was to eat, sleep, train, maybe it would be different. So you have to think about what your job is, your stress level, how much you sleep, all those factors come into play. But I think for most people, I don't even think you asked this question, but for most people, I think 4 days seems to work really, really well. That's
an inspiration, because it's something I've toyed with, but I was like, don't want to do that. And that way of thinking about things is very rigid and limits a lot of people. And by going through and having this conversation, just hearing a response is what I will test. I don't know if I'll go down to 3 days, but there is the idea, right? Like, if you rest your body for longer, if you could, you don't have as much stimuli in the gym, right? Because you're going from, say, 5 to 3, but maybe it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing. But the time that is in there could have the greater reward, because there's definitely, at least what I notice, this is where I put like arms on a Friday or something, but like the days at the beginning of the week, I tend to notice more intensity. It's easier for me to generate in the gym. As the week goes on, and I'm training 5 days a week, it tends to drop a little bit. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, well, maybe if I did try 3 days a week, the actual average level of intensity across all training days is actually, maybe I'm able to double that or something along those lines, or just increase it on average across all of them. So it's interesting, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective. You mentioned that you do coaching, and we're going to be wrapping up here. So I want to say thank you and acknowledge you for all the information. But you mentioned you do coaching and stuff, and you mentioned it earlier. But if somebody wants to reach out to you for coaching, how's the best way for them to reach out and then, shill your stuff again?
So either can, direct message me on Instagram. Again, that's at Coach Eric Broser on Instagram. On Facebook, you could direct message me also. Or just shoot me an email to bodyfx2, BODY, the letter F, the letter X, the number 2, at AOL.com to inquire about coaching. Or if you want to just go look at the different programs and pricing structures I have, you can go to www.broserbuilt.com if you want to do that first.
Broser with an S, built.com, you said, right?
Correct. BROSERBUILT.com.
Sweet. Awesome. Test your levels. What did you want to say an outro real quick or have anything that you want to mention? Sorry, Eric and I were going back and forth a lot in this one, but
it's all good.
I enjoyed it.
No, I was actually just going to read something real quick. I don't, fuck it. We'll do it on another one. But it was about taking cardarine safely without cancer. And it was from Enhanced Info on Instagram. I found it interesting.
That's a whole nother subject.
I know. We'll cover that in another one. But no, I mean, you can find me, Test Your Levels, on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find Sam. I'll let Sam do that. But if you're listening to this, we do have a YouTube channel, so you can see our beautiful faces. And if you are watching this on YouTube, we're on every major podcast platform. We have links in the description to all the stuff that we are all associated with. So come click on those links, give us your money. And that's about it. No, I'm just playing. But yeah. So, and then Sam, where can we find you on social?
Just Sam Stolt. Appreciate you guys. If you guys find value in this stuff, if you're still here at this point, check out the other shit we put out. Like if you were like, hey, I'm listening to this whole thing, it was kind of an interesting conversation, check out Test Your Levels. Check out Eric on Instagram or other places on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. You can find me on any of the socials at Sam Stolt or some variation of that. Appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.